My son-in-law, Derek, a man who wore his ambition like an expensive tailored suit, stood in the middle of the living room of the house he desperately wanted to own and told me I was broke. He said it with a sneer, his voice dripping with the contempt a wealthy man reserves for a poor relation. He looked at my mended cardigan, at my sensible worn shoes, and at my quiet, frugal existence, and he judged me a worthless, penniless burden. He only realized the catastrophic error of his judgment 3 weeks later, when the eviction notice arrived, informing him that his dream house had been sold, for cash, to a new, anonymous owner. The owner, of course, was me. Hi, everyone. I'm Grandma Vivian. My name is Vivian Sterling. I'm 80 years old, and for the past 50 years, the world has seen me as a simple woman of simple means, and I have been happy for them to think so. My late husband, Leo, was a brilliant man, a quiet genius who saw the world in a way others didn't, and he taught me that true wealth has nothing to do with what you own, but with what you don't owe. This is a story about the difference between being poor and being broke. It's the story of how a quiet, frugal old woman, pushed to the breaking point by the greed and contempt of her own family, decided to finally open a dusty old ledger and balance the books. This is not a ghost story, not in the traditional sense, but it is a story about a haunting. The haunting of a man's shallow dreams by a quiet, hidden, and immense fortune. It is a story I have savored in my heart, a secret that still brings a small, quiet smile to my face. Before I let you in on this secret, I would be so grateful for your support. Please, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your presence here, your willingness to listen, proves what my dear Leo always knew, that the best things in life are, indeed, free. To understand how I came to own my son-in-law's dream house, you must first understand the life I lived and the secret my husband left behind. Leo was a computer programmer, not in the modern sense of a Silicon Valley millionaire, but one of the pioneers. A quiet, bearded man who, back in the late 1970s and early 1980s, worked for a small, struggling company run by a few brilliant, eccentric young men in garages. He was a man who saw the future in lines of code, but who found his personal joy in the simple, analog world. He loved me, he loved our daughter Amelia, and he loved our small, tidy, paid-for-in-full brick bungalow. He had no desire for fancy cars, for big houses, for the endless, exhausting pursuit of more. Viv, he used to say to me, his voice a low, gentle rumble, we have everything we need right here. A roof over our heads, good books to read, and each other. Everything else is just noise. But he was not a fool. He was a man who understood systems. And he understood that the small, quirky company he worked for was building something revolutionary. The company offered its early employees stock options in lieu of a high salary. Most of his colleagues cashed them out as soon as they could, buying sports cars and bigger houses. But Leo held on to his. I remember the day he came home, with a thick, official-looking portfolio. He sat me down at our small kitchen table. Viv, he said, his eyes serious, I am putting all of my shares, everything, into a blind trust, in your name. I've arranged it so that it will be managed and will grow, untouched. I don't want to know what it's worth. I don't want it to change us. He took out a small, leather-bound ledger and a single, sealed envelope. This ledger contains all the information. The account numbers, the trust documents, the name of the law firm that manages it. The password to access the online portal is in this sealed envelope. I want you to put this away somewhere safe. And I want you to promise me something. Promise me you won't open it, won't even think about it, unless you are in the direst of straits. Live your life, my love. Live our simple happy. I promised. I took the heavy ledger and the sealed envelope, and I placed them in the back of our old metal lockbox, the one where we kept our birth certificates and the deed to the house. And then, for 30 years, I forgot about it. Leo passed away from a quiet, peaceful heart attack in his own bed 15 years ago. I was heartbroken, but I was not destitute. I had my widow's pension, I had Social Security, and I had our house, which was mine, free and clear. I continued to live the life he had taught me to love. A simple, frugal, and deeply contented life. I mended my own clothes. I took the bus instead of owning a car. I found joy in my garden, in my library books, in my weekly phone calls with my daughter, Amelia. Amelia was a good daughter. She was kind, she was loving, but she had not inherited her father's simple soul. She had a hunger for the shiny things of the world, a hunger that was fanned into a raging fire when she met and married Derek. Derek was a man made entirely of surfaces. He was a high-end real estate agent, a man who sold dreams for a living. His own life was his most important listing. He wore expensive watches, drove a leased BMW, and spoke about restaurants and vacation spots as if they were battlefields where he had won glorious victories. He was a man who lived in a constant state of performing his own success. My quiet, frugal life was a source of profound, almost comical embarrassment to him. He could not understand it. He saw my simple clothes, my small, tidy bungalow, my lack of interest in the things he valued, not as a choice, but as a failure. He assumed I was poor. A sweet, but pitiable, poor old woman. "We should really get your mother a new coat for Christmas, Amelia," he would say, his voice filled with a kind of theatrical public pity. "That old cloth one is just so sad." "I love this coat, Derek," I would reply calmly. "It's warm, and it has good pockets." He would just shake his head, a small, superior smile on his face, a smile of a man looking at a curious, primitive creature who simply doesn't know any better. For years, our worlds existed in parallel. I in my simple, contented reality, and they in their frantic, expensive one. But 2 years ago, the building my small, paid-for bungalow was a part of was sold to a developer. I was forced to move. Derek and Amelia saw this not as a crisis, but as an opportunity. Their opportunity. "Mom, it's a sign," Amelia said, her voice filled with a genuine, if misguided, excitement. "You'll come and live with us. We have that beautiful guest suite downstairs. It's perfect." Derek saw a different kind of opportunity. A financial one. "It makes no sense for you to get your own apartment, Vivian," he said, using his smooth, logical, real estate agent voice. "The rents are astronomical. You can live with us, rent-free. It will allow you to hold on to what little savings you have. It's the smart thing to do." And so, once again, I found myself persuaded by a mixture of my daughter's love and my son-in-law's seemingly flawless logic. I sold my bungalow, the last physical piece of my life with Leo. The money from the sale, a modest but not insignificant sum, I put into a simple savings account. And I moved into their dream house. The house was the true love of Derek's life. It was a magnificent, modern home in a gated community, a house they were renting, a house that was far, far beyond their means to ever purchase. It was his stage. He would host dinner parties, showing off the gourmet kitchen, the infinity pool, the breathtaking ocean view. The house was a constant, living performance of the man he so desperately wanted to be. My presence in this house was a problem for him. Not a financial one at first, but an aesthetic one. I was the one piece of old, shabby, mismatched furniture in his perfect showroom. My quiet, frugal habits were a constant, silent rebuke to his lavish lifestyle. He would watch me wash out a plastic sandwich bag to reuse it, and his face would contort with a kind of pained disbelief. The tension in the house began to build. It was a quiet, unspoken thing. The real trouble began when the owner of the house, a wealthy investor who lived overseas, announced that he was putting the property on the market. Derek was thrown into a frantic, desperate panic. He could not bear the thought of losing his stage, his symbol of success. He became obsessed with buying the house. It was the only thing he talked about, the only thing he thought about. He went to the bank. He tried to get a mortgage, but the house was astronomically expensive. And Derek, for all his performance of wealth, was living on a knife's edge of debt. His income was high, but his expenses were higher. He was, as my Leo would have said, house rich and cash poor, except he didn't even own the house. His loan application was rejected. The rage and humiliation he felt needed a target. And the closest, most convenient target was me. His resentment, which had been a quiet, simmering thing, now boiled over into open contempt. My small, insignificant presence in his house was inflated in his mind into the sole reason for his financial failure. He started making comments, small at first, then more pointed. "You know, that extra $500 a month on the grocery bill really adds up, Amelia." I ate like a bird. "The increase in the utility bill since your mother moved in is not insignificant." I spent most of my time in my room, reading with a low-wattage lamp. I was no longer just an aesthetic problem. I was now a financial burden, the drain on his resources that was keeping him from his dream. The final ugly confrontation happened on a Saturday afternoon. He had just come from a second, humiliating meeting with his bank, where his appeal for the loan had been summarily rejected. He came home in a black mood. He walked into the living room, where I was sitting quietly, mending a tear in the sleeve of my favorite old cardigan. He stood over me, his hands on his hips, his face a mask of ugly, self-pitying rage. "This is your fault," he spat, his voice a low, vicious growl. I looked up at him, my needle poised in midair. "I beg your pardon, Derek. This house," he said, waving his arm around the magnificent room. "I could have had it. I could have bought it. But the numbers don't work. The margins are too thin. And do you know why? Because of you." May? I whispered, my heart beginning to pound. "Yes, you," he sneered. "You and your endless pathetic needs, your food, your electricity, the money we have to spend on you. It's a leak, a slow, constant drain on this family's finances. We are carrying you, and your dead weight is sinking us." "Derek, that's not fair," Amelia said, her voice a weak, trembling protest from the other side of the room. "The hell it's not fair," he roared, turning on her. "I am trying to build a life for us. A beautiful life. And her, she contributes nothing. She just sits there, with her old sad clothes and her old sad ways, and she sucks us dry." He turned his venomous gaze back to me. "We took you in out of pity, Vivian," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Pity, because you are a broke, old woman with nothing to her name. You are a charity case. You are a burden. And I am sick to death of it." "I broke." "Rian?" The word landed in the quiet room with the force of a physical blow. It was the ultimate insult from a man like him. To be broke, in his worldview, was to be less than human. It was to be worthless. I looked at my daughter. She was standing by the fireplace, weeping silently, her hands over her face, offering no defense. She was letting it happen. I looked back at my son-in-law, at his handsome, hateful face, and I felt not sadness, not even anger. I felt a profound, clarifying calm, the kind of calm that comes when a long, tedious, and painful equation is finally solved. I slowly, carefully put my needle and thread down on the small table beside me. I looked him straight in the eye. "You are quite right, Derek," I said, my voice quiet but clear and steady. "I am a burden, and it is long past time I did something about it." "No, gone." I stood up, and I walked back to my room, my back straight, my head held high. I closed the door behind me. I walked over to the closet. In the back, on the top shelf, was the old metal lockbox from my bungalow. I hadn't opened it in 15 years. I took it down. I placed it on my bed. The key was still on my keychain. I inserted it into the lock. It turned with a rusty, grating sound. I opened the lid. Inside were the dusty relics of my old life. My birth certificate, my marriage license, my husband's death certificate, and at the bottom, the heavy, leather-bound ledger and the sealed, yellowed envelope. The fire extinguisher for a house that was now most definitely on fire. I sat on my bed, and for the first time in 30 years I opened the ledger. The pages were filled with my husband's neat, precise handwriting. It was a history of his investment, a series of numbers and dates and stock symbols that meant little to me. But it was the note he had written on the first page that made my breath catch in my throat. My dearest Vivian, it read, "If you are reading this, it means the rainy day has come. I'm sorry for that. But do not be afraid. The world of money is a noisy, foolish place. But you are a smart, capable woman. You will know what to do. Remember what I always told you. The best revenge is to live well, and the second best revenge is to own the thing your enemy loves most. This is your rainy day fund. Go make a flood." Under me. With trembling hands, I picked up the sealed envelope. Inside was a single slip of paper, with a long, complex password written on it. I opened the laptop my daughter had given me for my birthday, a gift I had barely used. I found the website for the trust management firm listed in the ledger. And with a heart that was pounding with a feeling I could not name, fear, hope, terror, and a wild, exhilarating sense of impending justice, I typed in the password. The page loaded. A series of charts and numbers and graphs filled the screen. I didn't understand most of it. But there was one number, at the very top of the page, in a large, bold font, that I understood perfectly. It was the current value of the trust. I stared at the number, at the long string of zeros that followed it. I did the math in my head, once, twice. It couldn't be right. But it was. My son-in-law, the man who had just called me a broke, useless burden, was living in a house he could not afford to buy. And I, the quiet, frugal old woman who mended her own cardigans, had enough money in the secret, forgotten account to buy his entire street. After that terrible Saturday, after the word broke had been branded onto my soul, the dynamic in the house shifted from a quiet Cold War to a campaign of open, psychological warfare, waged entirely by my son-in-law. My small act of defiance, standing up and walking away, had been interpreted by Derek not as a sign of wounded dignity, but as an act of insolence. The poor relation had dared to have pride. He could not forgive it. His cruelty became more overt, more deliberate. He had established his narrative, that I was a broke, useless burden, and now he set about proving it to himself, and to my daughter, every single day. He began to manage my existence with the ruthless efficiency of a cost-cutting consultant. He would make loud, pointed comments about the grocery bill, holding up a carton of milk at the dinner table and saying, "Amelia, we need to switch to the store brand. With 3 mouths to feed, every penny counts." He would, accidentally, leave the electricity bill on the kitchen counter, with the total amount circled in red ink, guidey. He took a perverse pleasure in these small, daily acts of humiliation, each one a little reminder of my supposed dependency, my worthlessness. Amelia, my daughter, was a ghost in these proceedings. She would flinch at his cruelties, her face pale with a shame she was too weak to act upon. She was trapped. She was addicted to the beautiful life Derek provided, to the dream house, to the illusion of status. And the price of that life, she was beginning to understand, was her own silence, her own complicity. The price was me. I, in turn, retreated into a state of quiet, watchful grace. I did not argue. I did not complain. I became smaller, quieter, more invisible than ever. I was playing a long game. While Derek was busy counting the pennies he imagined I was costing him, I was sitting on a secret hoard of dragon's gold. The ledger and the sealed envelope sat in the bottom of my lockbox like a sleeping dragon. For a week I did not touch them. I was afraid. Afraid of the power they represented. Afraid of the woman they might turn me into. My husband, Leo, had been a man of immense integrity. He had wanted us to live a simple life, a life unburdened by the complexities of great wealth. To open that ledger felt like a betrayal of his deepest principles. But then one evening, I overheard Derek talking to Amelia in the kitchen. His voice was low and venomous. "I don't know how much longer I can stand it, Amy," he was saying. Seeing her sitting there, in her old mended sweater, it's a constant reminder of failure, of poverty. It's dragging us down. And in that moment, I knew. Leo had given me the fire extinguisher for a reason. And my house, my life, my dignity was on fire. To honor his memory was not to live in poverty while his legacy sat gathering dust. To honor him was to use the tools he had given me to protect the values he held dear: dignity, independence, and a quiet, unassailable strength. The next morning I told Amelia I wanted to go to the public library. It was one of my few remaining pleasures, a free and quiet sanctuary. Derek, with a long-suffering sigh, agreed to drop me off on his way to work. "Just don't be requesting any of those expensive hardcover books, Vivian," he said with a small, cruel smile. "The library card is free. Let's keep it that way." I did not go to the fiction section. I did not go to the biography section. I went to the public access computers, a row of old, slightly sticky machines at the back of the library. I sat down and took the ledger and the sealed envelope out of my handbag. My hands were trembling. This felt like a greater transgression than any of a religious nature. I was about to look upon the face of a God I had spent 30 years pretending did not exist. I opened the ledger. The pages were filled with Leo's neat, familiar script. It was a language I did not understand. Stock symbols, purchase dates, ticker names. APL, MSFT, AMSN. They were just letters to me. But it was the other note, on the inside cover, that I understood perfectly. It was a list of names and numbers. The name of the trust management firm in Delaware. The name of the senior partner Leo had worked with, a man named Mr. Abernathy. And a phone number. I then looked at the sealed envelope. My heart was pounding. With a shaky finger, I broke the brittle, yellowed wax seal. Inside was a single slip of paper. On it was a complex, 16-character password. I took a deep breath. I navigated to the website of the trust firm. I found the client portal. And with fingers that felt like clumsy foreign objects, I typed in the username from the ledger and the password from the envelope. I hit enter, and the page loaded. It was a dashboard, a dizzying array of numbers and charts. I felt a wave of vertigo. I was out of my depth. I, a woman who considered balancing her checkbook a major financial undertaking, was now looking at the inner workings of a machine I could not possibly comprehend. I almost closed the laptop. I almost gave up. But then my son-in-law's sneering face flashed in my mind. Broke. My resolve hardened. I could not do this alone. I needed a guide, a translator. I looked around the quiet library, and my eyes fell upon the young man at the reference desk. His name was Alex. He was a college student who worked here part-time. He had helped me before, showing me how to use the online catalog, always with a patient, gentle kindness that was a stark contrast to the world I now lived in. He had kind eyes, and he wore a t-shirt with a picture of a circuit board on it. He looked like he understood the language of this new world. I took a massive leap of faith. I gathered my ledger, my envelope, and my courage, and I walked over to his desk. "Excuse me, Alex?" I said, my voice a quiet whisper. He looked up from his book, a warm, genuine smile on his face. "Hi, Vivian. What can I help you with today? Looking for a new mystery novel?" "No, dear," I said, my heart pounding. "I have a different kind of mystery." I placed the ledger on his desk. I pointed to the computer screen I had left open. I have this. It was my husband's, and I have no idea what it means." He came over to my computer. He looked at the screen, at the charts, and the numbers. His eyebrows shot up. He looked at the ledger, at the names of the companies. He looked back at the screen. And then he looked at me, this quiet little old lady in a mended cardigan. And his jaw literally dropped. He was silent for a full minute, his eyes just scanning the screen, a look of dawning, incredulous awe on his face. "Vivian," he finally whispered, his voice a reverent hush. Do you have any idea what this is?" "I know it was my husband's investment," I said. "He told me not to worry about it." "Not worry about it?" he repeated, a hysterical little laugh escaping his lips. He pointed at the number at the top of the page. The number with the long, beautiful, impossible string of zeros. Vivian, this isn't a rainy day fund. This is a hurricane. This is a tidal wave. This is a tidal wave. This is a dragon's horde. You're not just not broke. You are astronomically, breathtakingly, mind-bogglingly wealthy. The weeks that followed were a secret second life. By day, I was Vivian Sterling, the broke, useless burden, eating my daughter's leftovers and being careful not to leave water rings on the coffee table. But 3 afternoons a week, I would take the bus to the public library, and I would become a titan of industry. Alex was my guide, my secret weapon. He was a brilliant, kind young man who was studying finance and computer science. The mystery of the quiet old lady with the forgotten fortune fascinated him. He became my devoted, secret apprentice. We would huddle in a quiet corner of the library, poring over the ledger and the online portal. He taught me everything. He taught me what a stock was, what a dividend was, what capital gains were. He explained the cryptic notes my husband had left. Leo had been more than a programmer. He had been a prophet. He had invested small, almost trivial sums of money in the 1980s in a handful of fledgling tech companies that no one had ever heard of. A company that made personal computers. A company that was trying to sell books on the internet. He had never sold a single share. He had just let them sit and grow and multiply for 35 years. Under Alex's guidance, I began to learn how to manage my own dragon. It was a terrifying, exhilarating process. I was an 80-year-old woman, learning a new language, a new world. The first thing we need to do, Alex explained, his voice a low, excited whisper, is diversify, and we need to liquidate some assets. You have immense wealth on paper, but very little cash. We need to sell a small portion of these stocks and move the funds into a real bank account that only you control. So began my secret life as a high-stakes trader. With Alex's help, I learned how to execute a stock sale. I sold a tiny fraction of my shares in the company that made phones. The number that appeared in my new secret bank account a few days later was so large it made me feel faint. While I was secretly becoming a multimillionaire, life at my son-in-law's dream house continued its grim routine. The for sale sign on the front lawn was a constant source of tension. Derek was becoming more and more frantic. His second, and then a third, loan application was rejected. He was a man obsessed, talking of nothing else, his mood swinging wildly between desperate optimism and black, venomous rage. And his rage was always directed at me. My presence was the scapegoat for all his failures. I was the reason the numbers didn't work. I was the financial black hole that was sinking his dreams. One evening, he came home after a particularly brutal meeting with his bank. He was drunk. He stood in the living room, weaving slightly, his face a mask of ugly, self-pitying despair. "It's over," he announced to the room. "The bank said no. Someone else is going to get this house. Someone with money. Someone whose life isn't being dragged down into the gutter by a broke, useless old woman." He looked directly at me, his eyes filled with a hatred that was pure and undiluted. I just looked back at him, my face a placid mask. Inside, my heart was beating with a slow, cold, powerful rhythm. "Patience, Vivian," I told myself. "Patience. Run." The next day at the library, I told Alex my plan. "I want to buy the house," I said. He looked at me. "Vivian, you could buy the whole street." "I don't want the street," I said. "I want that house, his dream house, and I want to do it anonymously." Alex's eyes lit up. He understood immediately. This was not just a real estate transaction. This was a chess move. A checkmate. He helped me find one of the best corporate lawyers in the city. I met with him, not as a frail old woman, but as the silent, powerful head of a newly formed entity, the Leo Sterling Legacy Trust. I was no longer Vivian Sterling, the burden. I was a client. A very, very wealthy client. The lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense man named Mr. Davies, handled everything. He contacted the real estate agent for the property. He made an offer. An all-cash offer, 20% over the asking price, with a promise to close in 7 days. It was an offer the overseas owner could not possibly refuse. The news that the house had been sold came to Derek not from me, but from his own gossiping network of real estate colleagues. He came home one night, his face white with a new kind of anguish. "It's sold," he whispered, slumping into a chair. "Some anonymous trust bought it. For cash. They didn't even see the place. They just bought it." He was a man mourning a death. The death of his dream. He spent the next few days in a state of profound depression, a ghost in his own soon-to-be-lost kingdom. He barely spoke to me, his contempt now replaced by a weary, resentful indifference. He had lost, and he was looking for someone to blame, but his old familiar target no longer seemed sufficient. The official letter arrived a week later. It was a crisp, professional letter from a law firm, addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Derek Sterling. It informed them that the property at 127 Ocean View Drive had been sold, and that the new owner would be taking possession in 30 days. It was a formal, polite, and utterly brutal eviction notice. I watched as Derek read it, his hands trembling. I watched as the color drained from my daughter's face. 30 days, she whispered. "Where will we go?" Derek didn't answer. He was just staring at the letter, at the name of the law firm at the top. Davies, Roth, and Associates. He had heard of them. They were sharks. The best, most expensive corporate lawyers in the state. Who was this person, this trust, that had bought his house from under him? I sat in my chair, sipping my tea, a quiet, useless, and entirely invisible old woman. The game was almost over. The final move was about to be placed on the board. The 30 days that followed the arrival of the lawyer's letter were a strange, surreal purgatory. The atmosphere in the house was thick with a toxic mixture of panic, resentment, and unspoken fear. Derek was a man possessed. He spent his days on the phone, trying to find a new rental, a new dream house to replace the one that had been stolen from him. But the real estate market was brutal, and his finances, he was discovering, were even more precarious than he had imagined. Every conversation ended in a slammed phone and a string of muttered curses. He and Amelia were constantly fighting. Their arguments were no longer about me. They were about their own shattered future. I would sit in my room and listen to their raised voices, the sound of their perfect life cracking and splintering. "We can't afford anything in this neighborhood, Derek." Amelia would cry. "We'll have to move. We'll have to downsize." Energy. "Don't you say that," he would roar back. "I will not be driven out. I will not be seen as a failure." His obsession with the anonymous buyer grew into a form of madness. He would spend hours online, trying to research the Leo Sterling Legacy Trust. He found nothing, of course. My lawyer, Mr. Davies, was a master of corporate discretion. The trust was a ghost, a phantom entity with bottomless pockets. This only fueled Derek's rage and his jealousy. He would rant for hours about the unfairness of it all, about the faceless foreign money that was destroying the lives of hardworking people like him. He was so consumed with his own victimhood that he barely noticed me anymore. I was just a piece of furniture to be packed, a logistical problem to be solved. His contempt had been replaced by a complete and total indifference, which was, in its own way, even more painful. The day of the move was a gray, joyless affair. A large moving truck was parked in the driveway. 2 sullen-looking men were carrying their expensive, minimalist furniture out of the house. Each piece that left felt like a small victory. Derek was a thundercloud of fury, directing the movers with sharp, angry gestures. Amelia was a ghost, her face pale and tear-streaked, her movements slow and robotic. They had found a new place to live. A smaller, less impressive rental in a neighborhood a step down the social ladder. It was a visible public downgrade, and for Derek, it was a fate worse than death. My own few belongings were packed into 2 small boxes. I sat on my suitcase in my empty room, waiting. The final confrontation happened in the empty living room. The movers were gone. The house was a hollow, echoing shell. All that was left were a few stray boxes and the three of us, strangers in a house that was no longer ours. "Well," Derek said, his voice a tight, bitter knot. "I guess this is it. The end of the dream." He looked at me, and a final, parting shot of his old contempt flared in his eyes. "I hope you're happy, Vivian. You finally managed to sink us completely." Before I could reply, there was a knock on the front door. We all turned. Standing in the doorway was a young woman in a sharp business suit, holding a clipboard. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling?" she asked, her voice bright and professional. "Yes," Derek said, his voice wary. "My name is Jessica. I'm from the property management company representing the new owner, the Leo Sterling Legacy Trust," she said. "I'm here to do the final walkthrough and collect the keys." Derek's face tightened. "Fine," he said, pulling the keys from his pocket. "Here, take them. I hope your new boss enjoys his blood money." Jessica smiled, a cool, professional smile. "Oh, I'm sure she will," she said. "Actually, the owner has asked me to convey a message to you. A new proposal, you might say." Derek and Amelia exchanged a confused look. "The trust," Jessica continued, consulting her clipboard, "is aware that finding a new rental on short notice can be difficult. Therefore, the owner is prepared to offer you the opportunity to remain in this house." Narandiyak. A flicker of wild, desperate hope ignited in Derek's eyes. "Remain? As tenants?" "Precisely," Jessica said. "You would of course have to sign a new lease agreement, at the current market rate." She named a number. A monthly rent that was nearly double what they had been paying before. A number so astronomically high, it sucked the air out of the room. Derek's face went from hopeful to purple with rage. That's insane," he sputtered. "That's extortion. No one would pay that." Jessica just smiled her cool, professional smile. "The owner is confident that the market will bear it," she said. "However, as a gesture of goodwill towards the former occupants, the owner has also authorized me to offer you an alternative. If you find the new rental agreement unpalatable, the owner has already pre-approved a new set of tenants. They're a lovely family, the Johnsons. They have 6 children, 4 dogs, and they are very, very excited to move in next week." She gestured to the driveway, where a large, beat-up minivan had just pulled up. A boisterous, laughing family began to spill out, their children chasing a pack of yapping, joyful dogs across the perfect, manicured lawn. They were the living embodiment of everything Derek despised: noise, chaos, and a joyful lack of pretension. He stared at them, his mouth agape, a look of pure, apocalyptic horror on his face. The idea of this chaotic, happy, dog-filled family living in his dream house, sleeping in his bedroom, enjoying his ocean view, was a form of torture so exquisite, so perfectly tailored to his own snobbery, that it was a work of genius. "Who are you?" he whispered, turning his horrified gaze from the Johnson family back to the property manager. "Who is this person? Who would do something like this?" And that was my cue. I had been standing silently by the staircase, a forgotten old woman in a mended cardigan. I took a step forward. "I would, Derek," I said, my voice quiet, but clear and steady in the echoing, empty room. He spun around and stared at me. He looked at me as if he had never seen me before. His brain, his logical, accountant's brain, simply could not process the information. The broke old woman, the anonymous trust, the impossibly wealthy, impossibly cruel new owner. The pieces were all there, but they formed a picture that was insane. "What?" he breathed. "The Leo Sterling Legacy Trust," I said, savoring each word. "Leo was my husband. I am the trustee. I am the new owner. This is my house now." "Non?" I have, in my long life, seen many expressions on many faces. But the look on my son-in-law's face in that moment is one I will cherish until the day I die. It was a mixture of absolute, mind-bending disbelief, dawning, stomach-dropping horror, and the final, crushing understanding of his own complete and utter defeat. He looked like a man who had just seen a dead pigeon rise from the gutter and turn into a dragon. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He just stood there, his face a slack, empty mask, his entire world, his entire identity, collapsing into a silent, screaming black hole. Amelia, my daughter, just sank to the floor and began to weep. Not with anger, but with a kind of terrible, broken laughter. The sheer, cosmic, poetic justice of it all was too much for her to bear. I walked over to Derek. I looked up at the man who had called me a broke, useless burden, and I gave him a small, quiet, pitying smile. "You were right about one thing, Derek," I said. "I am a burden. My presence in your life was a financial burden you could no longer afford, so I have removed myself. You have 30 days to vacate my property." I turned and walked out the front door into the sunshine without looking back. I left them there, in my house, with the ghosts of their own greed. I did not rent the house to the Johnsons. That was a bit of theatrical flair arranged by my lawyer. Instead, I rented it, at a significantly subsidized rate, to a nonprofit organization that provides temporary housing for families escaping domestic abuse. The thought of my beautiful silent house being filled with the sounds of women and children finding safety, finding peace, finding a new start, that was the best revenge of all. Amelia and I are talking. It is a slow, difficult process. She is in therapy. She is trying to understand the choices she made, the person she became. I do not know if we will ever find our way back to what we were, but we are at least walking in the same direction. As for me, I am living my life. My simple, quiet, frugal life. I have a small, comfortable apartment. I have my garden, my books, my walks in the park. The money, the dragon's hoard, sits silently in its trust, a sleeping giant I have no need for. I have learned that its greatest value is not in what it could buy, but in the one, perfect, priceless thing it allowed me to do, to reclaim my own dignity. The world is full of men like Derek, men who measure the worth of a human soul on a balance sheet. They see kindness as a weakness, simplicity as a failure, and love as a liability. They are the truly broke ones. Their lives are built on a foundation of noise, of performance, of a desperate, hungry need for more. They have forgotten the quiet, immense, and unassailable power of having enough. So, if someone ever looks at your simple, quiet life and calls you poor, do not believe them. Smile to yourself, tend your garden, read your books, and remember that the most valuable treasures are the ones that are never, ever, for sale. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for sharing this small piece of my quiet and very, very rich life. Please, show your support for this channel by liking this video, subscribing, and clicking that notification bell. In the comments below, I'd love for you to share one thing in your life that is priceless to you. Love you all. This is Grandma Vivian, and I'll see you in the next story.